Good afternoon. I'm Rhiannon Llewellyn, the Deputy Head of Henllys Church and Wales School and currently teaching Year 6. I'd like to speak to you today about assessment for learning and the approach that we have in our school to the day-to-day assessment that happens in lessons. Assessment for learning, as I'm sure that you're all aware, is the approach to teaching and learning that creates feedback, which is used to improve learner outcomes, where learners are highly involved in their own learning process, gaining confidence from what's expected of them, what's standard, and how it is that they can get there. Assessment for learning aims to close the gap between learners' current situation and where they want to go in terms of their learning journey. It also supports metacognition, the metacognitive development of learners thinking about thinking. For us, we've heavily invested in this assessment for learning process. We've developed a progressive approach to assessment and ensured that it's part of the professional learning and practice day to day. Where learners are reflective practitioners, critical thinkers, they are able to consider and reflect on their own learning, think about how they learn best and why it is that they learn best in that way. It's important for us to also understand who supports the practice and why it is so relevant in the new curriculum for Wales. The curriculum for Wales believes that there should be an active engagement between learner and practitioner on a regular basis to support learner progression, understanding that to be truly effective, those involved within the learning journey need to collaborate and work together. Learners need to understand where they currently are in their stage of learning, where they need to go, and how it is that they are to get there, considering any barriers in place where practitioners will help to minimise these. The curriculum for Wales clearly explains what they truly believe to be the role of the learner, which is to ensure that they are participating and contributing to learning and assessment processes. Amongst other things, they state that learners should respond actively to feedback within their learning, developing positive attitudes towards receiving, responding, and acting upon feedback given to them, but also to reflect on their own learning journey and to develop responsibility for their own learning over time. We believe in Henllys that our progressive attitude towards assessment for learning helps children to do exactly that. Also, Estin support this practice through their recommendations that we should embed systematic opportunities for learners to develop their skills in evaluating and improving their own and peers' learning, to develop constructive professional learning opportunities for schools to improve their understanding and use of formative assessment, of which assessment for learning is, and to facilitate and support collaboration across schools to develop an understanding of effective practice of formative assessment. And the whole of our cluster is now led by myself with assessment for learning, and all of us have non-negotiables to ensure that the learners have a repertoire of skills that are systematic but also progressive, and from one school to another there are similarities when entering secondary school to allow all of our children to develop and succeed. At Henllys Church and Wales School, we've been on a journey that began in 2020. We introduced the Purple Pen of Progress that allowed children to respond to teacher feedback, to edit and improve the quality of their work, and to make progress so that they can ensure that their work is to the best standard. Throughout our school, there was a whole school approach where all would support assessment for learning opportunities. That includes all practitioners working with the children. We recognised that there were already varying strategies that could be used and were used in the classroom, but these weren't done consistently. Some strategies would be naturally used as part of daily teaching for learners to reflect on their own practice and to engage in activity within the class. Other strategies would need to be taught. I'm sure that looking at the list there, you can recognise practices that are already in place in your own school. Success criteria that are co-constructed was a key feature within practice, but again needed to develop consistency and also needed to ensure that the expectations were appropriately outlined. This is an example of an assessment for learning display board. The display boards are in place in all classrooms throughout the school. This is an example of the Year 6 board, as it has all 7 strategies that are progressive throughout the school. And the idea is, and our aim is, that children, by the time that they get to Year 6, will be confident with all 7 strategies and will recognise the most effective strategy to use depending on reflection of the learning experience. So throughout our school, there are 7 key written assessment for learning strategies. These are developed year on year. Children are expected to use previously taught strategies as well as the new one introduced in that year group. And across the school, there is one oracy strategy used to develop assessment vocabulary. These are the 7 progressive strategies that are used throughout our school. I'll go on to explain each strategy, which I'm sure some of which are familiar to you, but also give some examples of how these are used throughout our school. So in reception, traffic light 1 is introduced. The idea behind this is that children simply will choose a colour in line with the learning objective that explains how well they felt they were able to complete the activity. This is not the level of enjoyment that the children had, but how successful they were at task. Here is an example in the Year 6, where a child has chosen this strategy as they felt it was most effective to give a snapshot of their understanding of the particular task, how well they were able to achieve the learning objective. Traffic light 2 is introduced in Year 1. This is a follow-on from the traffic light 1, where the children will select a particular colour that reflects how successful they were, but also then the children are encouraged to provide justification for the colour that they've chosen. Initially, the teachers and teaching assistants act as scribe so that they can model the kind of response that we would be expecting, moving on by the end of the year to the children being able to independently write a statement of justification. Here is an example of where the purple pen is used in order to provide justification for the colour chosen by the child, and also you can see there the marking is responded to by the child, which again is ingrained in practice throughout the primary school. In Year 2, the strategy that is introduced is 2 stars and a wish. This in the first instance is for self-assessment, and towards the summer term is developed to consider peer assessment of other children's work. There are a bank of sentence starters, as you can see, for each of the stars and the ways forward. These are also developed along with each cohort so that they can make sure that they are familiar with the sentences that would be used to reflect on their learning. Here is an example, and you can see that it gives the opportunity for the practitioner to agree with the statements made by the children. This shows a clear understanding that they know their success and where they achieved, but also how they could further develop their learning. In Year 3, the Learning Line strategy is introduced. Children will visit their learning line at pit stops throughout the lesson and record how they feel their learning is progressing as they develop throughout the lesson. Here is an example of a child who is reflecting at the end of a learning activity, explaining why they feel confident and how they're able to move the learning forward, and also explaining what parts of the lesson they enjoyed learning. In Year 4, the strategy that's introduced is Tickle Pink and Purple for Progress. This is where children will consider their work, identify an area in which they're particularly proud of and they felt that was successful, underlining this in pink. They'll then provide an explanation as to why they chose that, and also then select another part of the work which they'll underline in purple and recognise that this could be improved. And you can see here that the children have actually redrafted, re-edited and improved the section in which they highlighted in purple. Strategy in Year 5 that it's introduced is Tell a Friend. This is where children show a mastery of skill, where they provide an explanation of their own and also examples given. This shows that the children have truly understood the entire learning objective. Rose Answers is the final written narrative that is the strategy introduced in Year 6. Children reflect on their learning and self-evaluate. And you can see from the example given that this is an extensive piece of writing where they'll consider the full learning journey. This is the roll the dice strategy, which is the oracy strategy that's developed throughout the school, where children will roll the dice and depending on the number rolled, they will then continue the sentence to develop their oracy skills and also understanding of assessment vocabulary. Children use purple pen throughout the school for a range of different reasons, including responding to marking, as you've seen in the examples given, peer assessment, and also links to the 4 purposes characteristics. There is a need for consistency for this to be effective throughout the school, so that there's a commonality of language around assessment, which the oracy strategy helps to progress and develop, but also that it needs to be an area where you build in time so that this becomes effectively embedded in practice. In addition to assessment for learning, we also have a planning for progression document for each of the AOLEs, with our middle leaders who are leading the AOLE create a document that ensures curriculum coverage throughout the school, considers principles of progression, statements of what matters, and also aligns this with the learning experiences. This planning for progression also is documented through our long-term planner, which each teacher completes, ensuring that we are fully considering principles of progression across AOLEs, but this time considering our specific year groups. We also have AOLE portfolios for each of the progression steps, which evidences progression throughout the school and shows coverage, where there are examples of different learning activities showing an exemplar of the expectation. Each of the AOLE leads also then carries out a self-evaluation activity that includes listening to learners with their books. They provide feedback to staff and governors and effectively monitor learner progress. We've also written new marking and feedback and assessment and progression policies to ensure this is reflective of the practice within school. Assessment for learning is at the heart of both of those key policies. The benefit of assessment for learning in day-to-day practice allows children to have a greater understanding of their progress. It improves self-esteem, confidence, resilience. It promotes and increases the level of independence, encourages learners to take responsibility for their learning, enhances classroom culture, and ultimately improves learner outcomes. Thank you very much for your time today. I know that there is opportunity for questions. However, if you'd like to make a note of my email address, feel free to get in touch. Diolch yn fawr.